A pleasant good morning to everybody. I want to say welcome to Antigua and Barbuda to all of you that may be visiting for the very first time. And I extend a special welcome to my colleagues, Minister Faulkner and Minister Kernan, and to the representatives of the Commonwealth Telecoms Organization, the Caribbean Telecoms Union, the Commonwealth Broadcast Association, and of course the Caribbean Broadcasting Union. And I want to say to my good friend Vic Fernandes that the public market here is only maybe a minute's drive away, and I know that he is well known in a number of capacities, not the least of which being the famous market storyteller. And I think that fame goes back 10, 15, 20 years. I remember when I lived in Barbados in the early 90s, I would wake up in the mornings before I went to work at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to the commentaries of the then market vendor, touching everything from sports and politics to culture and music. So I am certain that Vic will produce a number of commentaries from Antigua for his market storytelling, which, by the way, I know I hear on a daily basis in the afternoons on the Caribbean Superstation. One of my favorite stations, especially since it's promulgating Caribbean music 24/7, 365. Special hello and welcome, of course, to Mr. Cozier and to everyone else. I know that the deliberations here over the next 48 hours are going to be very important, and I certainly will be part of those discussions, and I certainly will look to hear from the experts who will speak a bit later on. And as I sat there this morning, I couldn't help but remember that in the 1970s, certainly here in Antigua, when ABS was then ZAL television, or may have just been moved to ABS as a state-owned entity, that people used to purchase those 3 or 4 color filters, and they put it in front of the black and white television. And that's how you began to see color television. And so here we are in 2012 talking about a totally new phenomenon, as it were. Because you know that for 60 years, analog really has delivered classic TV programs and brought history into our living rooms. And I understand that if not by the end of 2013, certainly by the end of 2015, analog free-to-air signals will be switched off and replaced with digital-only signals. We in the Caribbean will obviously need to move to digital TV to improve the viewing experience, keep up to date with technology, and to free up broadcast space for other innovative services like high-speed mobile broadband. And I am hopeful that in the course of today's deliberations, we can expound on that, because the fact is, more than ever, there is now a higher demand for that finite resource called spectrum, and more than ever, there is a very high public appetite for mobile broadband services. In fact, here in Antigua, we will be commissioning the first 4th generation long-term evolution 4G LTE mobile network in the coming weeks, and by the first quarter of 2013 we would have commissioned at least 1, if not 2 additional networks in the 4G LTE realm, and you can appreciate the demands on the spectrum. So I say that switching to digital television and the freeing up of broadcast space for other innovative services is an important part of this discussion. The digital switchover is one of the biggest technological changes since color TV was introduced more than 3 decades ago. And we in the Caribbean will need to join those nations who have already switched over or are currently switching, including the United States, the UK, the Netherlands, Sweden, New Zealand, the African continent, you name it. And I want to say as an aside that, and this is something that I need to say because I know people will stop me and say, well, what impact will this have on my being able to watch ABS or cable here in Antigua? Because we have a cable television penetration rate here of approximately 92%. So it is my understanding most of the newer televisions connected by cable or satellite won't be affected. Now, I recognize that the workshop themes include transmission trials and how you regulate the transition from analog to digital. But I'm particularly interested, Mr. Cozier and the representative from the Commonwealth Broadcast Association, in what I call, and what you have called rather, the styling and repurposing content for the digital era. Of course, Mr. Casimir here will tell us about how we can harmonize the digital dividend spectrum, but this whole notion of how we repurpose content. So the old analog signals are likely to be switched off, and as I said, the spectrum will be freed up for other purposes, not just for wireless broadband, data and telecommunication services, but it's important for me to state, certainly for the benefit of viewers and listeners, certainly here in Antigua, that new and stronger digital TV signals will be available, and high-definition channels will become more widely available. The fact of the matter is, if we surrender this spectrum and make it available to more ubiquitous type services, we will be able to use a smaller portion of the spectrum and offer a wider range, I believe, Nigel, a wider range of services on the same spectrum space. Now, I also want to mention, because we have had concerns here in Antigua recently by a number of what I call pseudo-commentators with respect to spectrum, that digital television is not going to have any known health risks. Because, you know, in this era where access to social media is a minute-by-minute phenomenon, we have a lot of armchair experts. And I want to make it clear that, subject to all the technical information that I have available to me, that there are no known health risks specific to digital television. One of the benefits of digital television is that it has the capacity to also provide special features such as audio description and subtitling for those with sight and hearing impairments. And we certainly in Antigua will be looking to see how we can apply those particular features. While a person can live without television, several people depend on TV for information and companionship. People's television habits have been changing a lot recently. I think you know that. Cable television changed how services were delivered, as did satellite. But the biggest change is coming from the internet, with customers streaming their favorite shows online in their own time rather than a set schedule. And I want to say to the broadcasters, the television broadcasters in the region, that this high, almost insatiable appetite for online viewing of the latest movies and their favorite shows in real time is something we certainly here in Antigua and Barbuda have been addressing our minds to. So you produce the content. Of course, some of you also help to transmit it, or you may have a subcontractor who transmits it, and then it ought to be received and received well. So I take it you will address your mind to those three distinct phases. And as I conclude my brief remarks, I want to reiterate that to the best of my knowledge, this switchover does not affect cable television subscribers. That is to say, those of you that view television via cable television. And I want to also indicate that a Caribbean-specific solution emanating from this and the preceding fora that Nigel would have alluded to. Of course, the CTU and the ITU have held a number of fora. I know that the Commonwealth Telecoms organization is here collaborating with the CBA and the CTU. That when we fashion this Caribbean-specific solution, it has to take into account some country-specific matters. Jamaica, of course, is 2.5 million people. You have that on one end. You have our neighboring Montserrat with 4,800 people, and then you have the mixture in between. Antigua has probably 100,000 people, but this region welcomes millions of visitors to the shores of the Caribbean each year, and we have to cater to them as well. So as I welcome you once again, I wish you a highly focused and results-driven symposium, and I want to place on record the government of Antigua and Barbuda's appreciation to all of those who have been involved in ensuring that today's proceedings and the proceedings for the next few days come off fairly well. Trevor Parker and Dave Lester Payne from ABS, and the management core at the Ministry of Information, the Royal Antiguan Hotel, and all the other support agencies that have made this morning possible. Thank you for listening to me. God bless you all.